ABCA 2024. You got the Perfect Game stage set up. You're doing a whole bunch of interviews. Like, what's going on with Perfect Game TV? This is kind of wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. We last year had ENG cameras, and we recorded interviews inside of the trade show where we'd have two, coaches' chairs, and we'd chat, and we aired it later down the road. And I made the mistake of saying when I walked out to Jim Jenks, who we stole from MLB, such a great leader, a great media partner for me. I said, we ought to just do this live. Like, we have a network? Why aren't we doing it live? Big mistake, because then he got it done. So it's been amazing. We're interviewing coaches at all levels. We're interviewing influential baseball people. A lot of it is coaches, but a little bit later on, we'll have Bobby Whitney's dad come sit with us. We'll have Cole Hamels look back on his amateur career. My big drive when we get to that level is still to talk about the highest level guys and what was it like when you were 14, 15, 16. Because some of those tales are the same, even though it was pre-social media, the anxiety that these players had. I think it's helpful for a 15-year-old athlete to hear a guy who has a Hall of Fame caliber career like a Cole Hamels that, he hit his pants too. He was nervous too. He stood out there and was shaking in those situations. So a lot of coaches and every kind of coach. High school, travel, college, JUCO, D1, D2, so it's fun.
I think maybe one of the criticisms of the Perfect Game setup is that it highlights the really top-end players. Right? Have you had experience, and what kind of coverage have you done with those, maybe not top 50 ranked guys, the run-of-the-mill kind of recruit out there?
Yeah, those are my favorite conversations to have, and I think for me to be able to have them and to learn about an athlete that finds a place to play at a D2 level, finds a place to play at an NAIA level. I mean, look, let's be honest, the lifeblood of this company and the success of this company is not the big league alumni. That's the headline, right? That's the marketing headline, and I don't shy away that it's okay to do that because there's a lot to be learned from. Even if you're a Perfect Game player that plays at some events, goes on, you're fortunate enough to play NAIA, then you become a professor, you become a teacher, you become a dad, you become a husband. So for me, there are still life lessons to be learned in succeeding. You may end up being a Perfect Game alum who's a teacher at a local middle school and you want to be the best you can. Well, you see another PG alum who plays in the big leagues and is talking about his focus, talking about his preparation. It all crosses over. But I will say, to your question, to address it directly, the lifeblood of this company are the hundreds of thousands of players that have come, taken on an event, they've been lucky enough to, the parents have supported them through it, they've been lucky enough to do it, and they've done well enough to find a place to play. And that's all the people in this company. The tiny amount are the people you're talking about. They're great stories, but it's me. I'm an NAIA pitcher. I wasn't, and I was a legacy, so I think people did me a favor. I wasn't the guy that was ever, if there was a Perfect Game, you were never going to do, an in-depth documentary on me. But I'd have been excited to do a single interview. So those are some of my favorite conversations, as you said, the players that are 500 down. Or learning from a player in college that wasn't ranked high, but did get into college. And then darned if in college he didn't play his way into a draft pick. That's not to look back and cast aspersions on any rankings, not at all. It's just to lift up the efforts of a kid that didn't shut it down when he wasn't ranked 50th or 100th or 125th.
You're talking to a lot of coaches this week, and I hear when I stand in the back and listen, you bring up recruiting a lot. Recruiting has here when I just changed so much. Like, there's no way of how do you do something in recruiting? How do you get kids recruited? I get that question often, but it changes every single year in the past, half decade to a decade. What have you been hearing from coaches that is kind of consistent about recruiting? What has been consistent over the past 5 years?
So I was lucky enough to MC a panel, not in front of a camera last night, with two elite recruiting coordinators, one from LSU, one from Wake Forest, but then an elite D3 coach and an elite D2 coach. And it was intriguing, the differences. Okay, first of all, the differences in how they approach athletes once they get that first conversation. I actually like that because we're different. We're different people. Come from different backgrounds, come from different homes, come from single parents. So I liked the fact that four great recruiters kind of were different in the way they approach kids, but the one thing that really stood out from all of them across the board, and it's actually two things, and it's the obvious thing, right? It's talent. You have to have some level of talent. You have to have some ability to play this game well, and you have to be a fit. And that's not anything that's offensive that shouldn't be. You know, if you want to be a writer but you can't write, maybe find something else to do. So you have to have some talent. And then the other thing that they all hammered, academics. Yes, LSU, he hammered academics. That's matters to them. Yes, Wake Forest. And darn sure the D3 coach, right, he was talking about you have to have it. And the D2 coach the same. So I think the talent, you know, continuing to grow as a player, you know, and they talked about finding kids on social media. They talked about that. But they also mentioned what I found interesting is once you're, and all the kids that you advise that look to you for guidance, once you ping the ear of a coach that you wanted to get his attention, whether it be through social, all four of them talked about, it's almost what I try to do, what you do when you do interviews, all four of them talked about, once you get to me, if you've gotten to me, act like you've done your homework. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So even the top one guy or two guy, that top name who's going to be a first round pick, they look for that in them. But also a D3 coach, don't be looking up where the school's located at the last minute. Do your homework. Understand, does he have a wife? Does he have kids? What is the program done? Hey, I see you guys had 20 wins 2 years ago. You had 40 wins this last year. And that one was one that's so obvious. That's so obvious to me. But I hadn't thought about that.
What about the high school and the travel coaches when they talk about? Well, actually, let me switch that question up. The high school and the travel coaches, the ones you're interviewing are very good ones. They've been very successful. I would say one of the hurdles for families these days is finding a good program. Out of the people and organizations that you've been talking to, what seems to be that consistency that makes them a good travel or high school program for parents to look for?
Yeah, the one thing they talk about a lot is communication, and really transparent communication. If there are questions you feel like you can't ask as a parent, then I'd be concerned. You know, you also, and this came up in the recruiting thing too, as it pertained to travel teams, you know, you also need to have a level of trust that your boy is becoming a man, and there are certain things, but you still have a curfew on him. You still say 11 o'clock, so you're intricately involved. So if there's a line of communication that you don't feel comfortable with, that's it. Like it's not the right fit for you. All these coaches, and we're talking about, you know, at the Canes, we're talking about, you know, what's going on with, you know, East Coast Ghost and artillery, higher level programs, Chase and Brewster, you know, with Sticks in Arkansas. It's big time communication, and so that's the one thing that if you're looking for, as you said, like you're a mid-major destined kid, or you're an NAI destined kid, and that's going to be your path, but you still want to play travel ball. It may not be for one, or maybe a second team in that program. I think to me the one thing that keeps coming up yesterday, even in all these interviews, is communication is paramount. And where that helps is with the families, the communication, but then do they have the trust of those coaches when they call on behalf of you, right? They're calling on behalf of you. We want to get you in at a D2 school. I vouch for this kid. How good are they at communicating? And do they have the trust of college coaches?
Nobody, I guess, ever gets to ask you the questions you're always asking, and
Right.
for people's opinions and how do they think. Well, your opinion on recruiting. How are we doing? Are we in a good spot, a bad spot, and what's the direction?
I think we're evolving. I don't know if it's a good or a bad spot. I know the rules that came down last year I love. And I was very ignorant to that a couple of years ago. I used to be, because I was new to the travel sports space. I was new to amateur baseball. I remember sitting down with Coach Allister of Stanford softball and asking her, why do you like these new softball rules? I don't get it. Isn't it better for young kids to be hip and cool and do all this? I said, oh no, I don't like it at all. And I had a back and forth with my analyst, Amanda Freed, who was an Olympian, and because I love the sport of softball as well. Well, years later, baseball followed that exact model, and I adore it. Those coaches last night were saying, hey, listen, all you travel coaches, you get more years with your players. You high school coaches, you parents, to develop. And what I love most about the new recruiting rule is it allows that fringe player to not get disheartened. He doesn't have all his buddies, even if they're committing to JUCOs and D2s, to feel the pressure of that kind of commitment. But to be satisfied that solves any problems, like, that's a hard question for me to answer, because I think it's constantly changing. Technology is involved more than ever. Social media is involved more than ever. You have the highest level athletes that are earning money now from playing. So that all has to kind of reshape itself. When the NCAA made these changes, everything was going to be reshaped. But I think a company like ours, we need to constantly challenge ourselves to do better. Instead of just providing a platform, let's try and find a way to do more. Let's provide education, as long as it's appropriate education, right? Because we don't coach teams, we don't teach the sport. You know, we provide the platform and the events, but I think there's a lot more that perfect game can do.
One more, I guess.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to these coaches, specifically the travel coaches? What advice would you give them? Say, you know what, I've listened to a lot of you guys over the years. Here's my suggestion.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. Be honest. Be honest with where your program started. Be honest where it's going. Be honest with your parents. Be patient with your parents. But also then earn that respect. Relationships are a two-way street. They always are, and people will treat you how you let them treat you. So be honest at every stop, because I think deception will, more than anything, will hurt the kid. So I think my advice is so simpleton advice. It's put the kid first every time, right? If you're into something where it's a stretch and you have to make some decisions that are not proper decisions because you need to do that to pay your bills, then you might want to check where you're at. I think my advice would be really be honest, because if you go that way, even if you fail, you set yourself back a couple of years, you make a mistake, getting signed up into a tournament, you lose money on that. I think if you can't have the honesty there, these are the ones that I talk to. Look, there's confidence and ego in these really successful programs. There just is. But I think the other thing is there's great communication. Thank you, man.
Darren, thank you very much, man, and enjoyed talking to you. Enjoyed doing the podcast with you. I grew up on your dad's. I grew up on your dad's voice, so this is kind of wild.
Do it again.
Yes.
Do it again.
Thank you very much, man. Good luck.